So for people meeting you for the first time, who's Connie?
Oh, thanks for that question. Well, I'm a nurse of 25 years, so I've been a nurse practitioner, but now I'm a functional diagnostic practitioner and health coach, and I just help people overcome their chronic gut issues. And that's really, it feels almost like a calling to me. I've been in healthcare for so long and had just so many patients that I've seen over 25 years in the emergency room that couldn't get resolution to their symptoms. And I feel like I have a more effective strategy for them to help them overcome their issues.
Okay. And like, was there a personal health journey?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I've been in conventional medicine for 25 years and was trained in the modern medical system and was really convinced that, that's the solution to health problems. But over the years, I developed my own issues. I had GERD, I had bloating, I had psoriasis, I had pretty significant joint pain where it was even difficult for me to climb up and down stairs. And I really couldn't get any relief. Yeah, I saw some doctors, I had some tests run, pretty much everything came back normal, which happens for so many people. Lab results are normal until you have more advanced disease. And so I came across, a podcast similar like this one, and it intrigued me and it got me looking into functional testing. And I found actually a program that allowed me to run all the tests on myself, and it was amazing all the things I discovered that conventional labs just couldn't see because they just don't, it's not that they don't dig deep enough, but they dig in a different direction. So the functional tests that I incorporate in my practice are just really very useful to uncover root causes. And so I went through that program and I was able to solve all my own health problems pretty much. I'm like 90% better. Every now and then I still have an issue, and like we said earlier, nobody is ever going to be perfect all the time. So we can get to some point of resolution. But so now I feel like I can just help people get the same kind of results that I did for myself.
Yeah. Are there any client success stories that really stuck with you?
Yes, definitely. I've had my most amazing success story was a client that came to me for something unrelated, really. It's just a person that had a lot of difficulty sleeping. They could only sleep, 3 or 4 hours per night, and we ran some lab tests, and we found some few minor things. It wasn't really anything significant, but we solved the sleep issue with optimizing the circadian rhythm. And unbeknownst to me, this client also had some issues with constipation for really years, would never leave the house without laxatives or some kind of support. And after we got the sleep issue solved, the constipation went away all on its own. And so that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, when most people think of gut health, they picture like taking a probiotic or like cutting out dairy. What do you think the general public gets wrong about gut health?
Well, I think that there's quite a few things, really. I think primarily the problem is that people go, oh, well, they go to their doctor because they have some kind of issue and they run some tests and maybe some lab work. Maybe you get a CT scan. Maybe you even get lucky and you have a scope, an upper GI or a colonoscopy, and you find out everything is normal. And then you get some advice, take some probiotics or take some fiber. And these are really just very generic recommendations. They don't take into account what I call bioindividuality. Everybody has their own story and their unique circumstances. And given this blanket of advice of taking a probiotic or taking a laxative to solve their chronic constipation really isn't helpful. And the other problem I see is that um, the gut, the digestive system is just being treated in a silo, not taking into consideration all the other organ systems in the body. And really everything has to work in concert and optimally for somebody to have optimal function. And so I think that's primarily the problem is just the silo approach and this one size fits all health advice that people get.
And what are some of the most common symptoms you see people deal with? Like, and why do so many people ignore them or like think it's just normal?
Well, I think there's a common misconception that people are told it's normal. It's just part of getting older or aging, and I typically think that just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal. But lots of people struggle with bloating and gas and inflammation, and you really want to look at those as symptoms of a deeper lying problem. Often these gut symptoms are just signals the body is sending out to alert you that there's something deeper going on, or whether it is parasites, or whether it's poor digestion, or maybe it's low stomach acid, or food sensitivities even. This is kind of what we want to look for with the functional testing to get to the bottom of it. And so we test, we don't guess. And so we want to address those common symptoms by digging deeper and really uncovering what's all underneath that.
Okay. Okay. So you talk about getting to the root cause instead of just treating symptoms, right? So what are some hidden or surprising root causes you often see behind like things like bloating and or fatigue?
I think that that's a very good question. I think the primary problem for the majority of the population is stress, because stress, chronic, especially chronic stress. There's good stress and there's bad stress. Good stress is like you're working out really hard because you're practicing for a marathon, but then you have a phase of recovery to where your body can get back to normal. But if you're under chronic stress, you're constantly in this fight or flight state. Your body's constantly producing cortisol, and that robs your body of energy to do all the other function that it's supposed to be doing, like immune function, like digestion, which digestion is considered on the low end of the totem pole in the body's function. So stress will rob all the energy from digestion, and you can end up with low stomach acid, and that can then lead to downstream effects from that. So I think that is the number one thing. Of course, there's other culprits like the standard American diet that people eat, which is just full of inflammatory foods that causes problems in the gut. So there's really poor nutrition, and then people don't sleep enough, or they sleep at the wrong time of day, and disrupt their circadian rhythm. So these are the top three, I would say.
Okay. And like how much you think is the physical uh, and how much is emotional or mental?
Well, I don't think I really wanna put, like, a percentage on that, because, again, when we think about the bio-individuality of the person, it's gonna be different for everybody. And some people are under more stress, they eat healthy, but yet they're stressed out and they're still not getting well, and others have a calm life, but they eat a poor diet, and then it's gonna be a more physical component, so it just really varies from person to person. I hate to put a one size, fits all approach on that.
Okay. Mhm. And so are there like quote unquote healthy foods that people eat every day and that might actually be the like reason for the gut issue?
Oh, that's certainly possible. That's a great question. So I think that, again, that's why I'm a proponent for the test don't guess. You can eat healthy foods, but if you have a gut that is sensitive to the foods that you're eating every day, you're not really doing yourself any favors. So all my clients get a food sensitivity test, and we can determine what kind of foods their body's reacting to. A most recent client, she was eating blueberries every day. They're a powerful antioxidant for a person that can tolerate them, but she was sensitive to them. And so eating them every day would just increase the level of her inflammation. So it's, again, just a very individual approach. And we just want to make certain that we don't perpetuate the inflammation by eating these healthy foods when we're sensitive to them. So that would be my approach to that subject.
Okay, so like what's your typical process when working with someone? Like how do you start untangling their like symptoms and then help them?
Oh, that's a excellent question. Thank you for that. I do like to spend a lot of time talking with my clients about what their goals are. Because initially, that's kind of what we need to determine. Where do you want to go from here? And then we take a health history and a medical history, also a lifestyle history. And then we have a panel. I use a panel of 5 tests typically. Depends on the client a little bit. And then all these results, all the history components and all the lab test results, they give me a pretty clear picture about what's going on. And then we develop a plan. I develop a plan with the client on how to move forward and which issue to tackle first and what kind of lifestyle changes we need to implement in order to get them the results they desire.
Can you share a specific example of a client you have worked with, like someone who came to you with a particular issue? I mean, I imagine you take a different approach depending on the individual, right? So, could you walk us through a couple of different client situations, what their specific challenges were, and how you helped them work through it?
I guess I would say to that I follow a process that while it's individualized to every client, it still is a structured process that we go through. So in the first phase, we look at the diet, and then in the next phase, we look at rest and sleep, and then in the third phase, we work on exercise. And that doesn't necessarily mean like you have to go to the gym, but maybe just increasing your activity level to walking. Because if for people that've been sick for a long time, they often don't have the energy to do hardcore exercise. So we'll work on that and what kind of activities we can incorporate that would be healing to the client. And then in the fourth phase, we work on stress reduction and addressing all the nervous system issues that clients often exhibit. And so this is kind of the process we go through. And then at the very end, if necessary, then we'll address some supplementation that may be required just to get the body a jump start into the healing. Some just to give some support. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and how long does it take typically?
It tends to vary from client to client, of course. It always depends on how long somebody's been sick. If you've been sick for several years, you're not going to overcome that problem in 3 or 4 weeks. So I typically start with a 3-month program, but frequently we'll get to a certain amount of healing, and then we'll sometimes clients opt to add on for another 3 months and another 3 months. It just depends on what kind of progress they're able to make. I think what people need to understand about the way I work, it really is a self-care model. And so what that means is the healing depends on the client. I cannot make these things happen for them. So my goal or my purpose is to be a guide, to provide the encouragement, to provide the knowledge, and to provide the accountability for them to reach their goals. But ultimately, it's going to be up to the individual to incorporate and implement those changes for the results that they want to see.
And like, what are some common roadblocks people face during the healing process?
Common roadblocks. I think one of the most common ones, of course, is all of the confusing information that you find online. Some people say eat more fiber, some people say eat less fiber, some people say only do carnivore, and then the next one is only so there's a lot of information out there that can be confusing to people. Take probiotics or don't take probiotics. Eat vegetables. No, don't eat vegetables. So I think that's the biggest issue is there's so much information out there that it can be confusing. And again, not everything works for everybody.
And then, do you see people like do people ever see like their symptoms get worse before they get better?
That's an excellent question. And I have seen that happen. Yes. So I think that sometimes what happens is that the healing takes place almost kind of in reverse. So the way you got sick, in the reverse order, you will get better. But what happens sometimes is as the body starts to heal and starts to eliminate some of the, whether it's undesirable bacteria, or whether you have parasites, or whether you have heavy metal toxicity or some kind of toxin buildup of some other kind, as the body is trying to get rid of that, you can have some nausea maybe, or maybe you have some headaches, just these are just elimination symptoms. And typically what's beneficial when that occurs is to just back off a little bit and then reintroduce whatever you think was causing it. So, but yeah, that can certainly happen sometimes.
Okay, do it ever happen with some of your clients?
I've had a couple that had that problem, and then we just back off on the protocol, and if there was some supplements involved, maybe we'll back off of the supplements and then just gradually reintroduce until they're able to tolerate it.
Okay.
It's actually called a Herxheimer reaction. There's actually a word for it.
What is it called?
Herxheimer, Herxheimer, Herxheimer.
Okay. And what's the difference between functional nutrition and just eating clean?
I have to think about that for a moment. I think there's definitely a difference because eating clean, well, that could really mean a lot of things. Maybe you're eating organic, maybe your water is filtered, maybe you make sure you eat pasture raised, grass fed beef, or chickens that haven't been treated with antibiotics or hormones. So that would be eating clean. Where in functional nutrition, we tailor the nutrition more to individual needs of whoever the client is. And then, again, taking into account the gut microbiome, which bacteria are overgrown, which bacteria are not supported enough. So then maybe we increase certain foodstuffs to improve the microbiome. And then again, excluding foods that the client is sensitive to. So it's just really, again, a very tailored approach. That's where I think functional nutrition differs from eating clean. It's just more tailored to the individual.
Okay. And then what are some tests you have to do and to get like a deeper insight into someone's health?
Yes, great question. I like several tests. I definitely like to do stool testing. The GI map is what I primarily use. And then the food sensitivity test I already mentioned. I like to do a hormone test, which is a stress and hormone panel. I like to do the test to assess how well the liver is functioning, as well as oxidative stress. And then I also like to do one that assesses how well the gut barrier is functioning, or if there's any hyperpermeability of the gut lining. So these are the 5 tests that I typically recommend.
Okay, and are there any gut related markers or blood work you think people should do, but like people should be taking it, but they don't?
You mean like from conventional medicine?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I don't. I mean, obviously, I would always recommend if a person has some kind of gut issues or, has a suspicion that there's something going on, I would always recommend to rule out the more serious causes. So whether that is colitis or diverticulitis or appendicitis, or maybe you have cholecystitis, which is inflammation of the gallbladder. There are so many different things that can, be actually detrimental to life. So I would always recommend that if there's something you're suspicious of something more serious going on, seeing your family doctor or GI specialist and getting that testing to rule out the more serious illnesses before we start working together. Absolutely.
Okay, and yeah, so are there any supplements you consistently recommend?
But I think that, again, that it's such an individual approach. So everybody says take probiotics. Well, there is a million probiotics on the market, and they all contain different genus and species and strains of probiotics, and they have different effects on the body. So it's just a really individual approach. The only thing really that I think that people are blanket deficient, I would say, would be minerals, especially magnesium and potassium. And I wouldn't have any qualms somebody taking a magnesium supplement. Sorry, I meant magnesium, because the the crux with magnesium is that it's it's responsible for so many reactions in the body, over 400 of them. And the paradox about it is when you're stressed, the body utilizes so much magnesium that it'll deplete you. But also, when your magnesium is low, then you have less resilience to stress. So it's just this escalating thing. Your magnesium is low, you're more stressed. You're more stressed, it depletes more magnesium. So I find universally people are deficient in magnesium.
Okay. And what's your take on fermented food? Should I be on the eating now?
Oh, there's certainly. Oh, yes, I like fermented food, whether it's kimchi or I'm German, I like sauerkraut a lot, so that's my favorite. But also, I like to make yogurt, so I'll make yogurt at the house from fresh cow milk, so that's really delicious. That's a good, probiotic. But there's kimchi and kombucha, so those can really be helpful. What I like about them is that they'll have a little bit more diversity than an off-the-shelf probiotic, especially if you make it yourself in your own home, so you don't get just one specific microbe to re-inoculate your gut. You get a variety of them.
Yeah.
So, and I think they tend to be a little bit more gentler.
And if someone is consistently bloated, but they're eating healthy, right? Where should they start looking for answers?
Well, as far as bloating goes, I think that there's quite a few causes. So the number one cause, I think, again, is stress. So when you're stressed, your digestive capacity is diminished. You're not able to make enough stomach acid. When you don't have enough stomach acid, the food sits in your stomach and just basically rots. And that's what creates gases and makes you feel bloated. The next thing that happens after that is this rotten food goes into your small intestines, and then you can get SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, just because the food is not properly digested in your stomach. So then it continues to ferment, and then you have more gas, and then you have even more bloating. That's how people can end up going from looking normal to looking like they're 9 months pregnant. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty common thing. Then constipation, of course, is another issue. When you're constipated, food is backing up and it just kind of sits there and ferments and it creates gas and gives you this bloated feeling. And then, of course, food sensitivities can lead to bloating, like we already talked about.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you also have some other things like mold and parasites, or, like stress, for sure.
And don't you think, like, when you have gut issues, don't you think the stress comes after?
Yes, I mean, I think that really it's a bidirectional relationship. So I think when you're stressed, it affects your gut, but when your digestion is off, it can also affect your mental health. So I think it's bidirectional. You can have a gut infection. You can be perfectly normal. You have a gut infection and then you develop stress around your gut. So I think it just really goes in both directions.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
And I think that mental health is a huge component to, nervous system regulation is so important if you want to achieve any kind of healing. You just can't do just one and disregard the other.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see that happen to me a lot because I feel.
And the opposite the opposite has happened to me. I prepare for a local talk, and I'm talking in front of a crowd, and 5 minutes before I'm going out there to speak, I'm like, I have to run to the bathroom real quick. So it happens to all of us. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what would you recommend someone stop doing right away if they're struggling with gut issues?
Oh gosh. Can I only pick one thing?
Yeah.
Okay. If I had to pick one thing, I think it's gonna be sleep. So I think people don't sleep enough and they sleep at the wrong time of day. I think that they need to be in bed by 10 so they can be asleep by 10:30. I think that they need to be up in the morning and catching some natural light outside and then catch some light throughout the day. Circadian rhythm is just a optimal circadian rhythm is just the foundation of health. And when the circadian rhythm is disrupted, it disrupts all the hormones throughout the day and it disrupts your digestion. And it really is just the basis for health is having a good sleep pattern and an optimal circadian rhythm.
So, so these are just some quick and fun questions. So, what is a gut health myth that drives you crazy?
A gut health myth that drives me crazy. Well, I think it's take a probiotic or eat more fiber. Maybe it's eat more fiber. I think eat more fiber doesn't work for many people just because their gut microbiome is so dysbiotic or, unbalanced that when they start eating more fiber, symptoms just get worse. So it backfires frequently.
Okay, and then a favorite gut-friendly snack or meal.
Protein. But caveat, only if your digestion works pretty good, because proteins are harder to digest. But protein is essential for the healing because all your cells or their entire body is made up of proteins. So you have to eat protein in order to repair.
What you think about the carbs? Like they're pretty easy to digest.
They are, but I would always caution use don't eat the processed carbs. If you want to eat carbs, stick with vegetables and root vegetables, especially sweet potatoes and turnips and things like that. They have good complex carbs that are more healthier, and they also feed your microbiome.
What's something you change your mind about, like when it comes to nutrition or healing? Like, is there something changed?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I tell you, gluten's been in the conversation for I think like a couple decades at least. And I used to snicker when people say, "Oh, I can't eat gluten. It makes me break out in a rash or it makes my joints hurt." And when what I learned actually that is that I'm gluten sensitive. And when I cut out gluten from my diet, so many things turned around for me. My psoriasis got exponentially better. My joint pain went away. And so I think that really there is something to gluten, and I had to change my mind about that. To cut out gluten?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, I would. And the reason I say that is that for many people that are struggling with inflammation and joint pain and skin rashes and headaches and those different things, gluten can be very inflammatory, and especially if you have some hyperpermeability in your intestines, then the gluten can cause more inflammation in the body. And so I would always recommend to cut it out for at least for a certain amount of time. And then once you start feeling better, then you can reintroduce, and maybe at that point you'll be able to tolerate it. But in an initial healing phase, I always recommend cutting out gluten and other inflammatory things like sugar and alcohol.
Okay, so what does your typical day of eating look like for you?
For me, oh, nice. Great question. I have chickens, so every morning I eat 4 eggs. And my husband, he makes sausage, pork sausage from scratch, and so we have eggs and sausage for breakfast. So, because I learned that my metabolic type is a fast oxidizer, and so I need to eat lots of protein and fat to be satiated and be able to last until lunch. And then I garden a lot, so most of our food we grow ourselves and we raise ourselves. We raise chickens and grow a big garden, so we always have a variety of things that we just grow at the house.
Okay, and like, is it true that like how well we chew our food can also affect our gut health?
Oh, certainly, absolutely, and that plays into the stress component. I think that it would be a good practice for everybody before they eat to sit down and just spend a minute with slow, deep breathing to calm the mind and get in a more parasympathetic or rest and digest state. And then digestion really starts in the mouth. So if you can chew your food to, 20 or 30 times until it's about applesauce consistency, that jump starts the digestion. It also triggers your stomach to release stomach acid, and it prepares your gallbladder to release the bile, and it prepares the pancreas to release the digestive enzyme. So it's just really a crucial first step in jump starting digestion.
Yeah. I mean, there's also something our parents used to like. They used to not let us drink water after we have a meal. I mean, not much water. Is that also a fact?
Yes. I mean, there are several things that play in the digestion that everybody can implement right away without anybody else, having to be hired or expertise taught from. So, number one, you already mentioned is chewing your food. You don't want to drink fluids while you're eating. So, you want to drink adequate amounts of fluid throughout the day because you need to be well hydrated for everything to function. But you want to stop drinking 30 minutes before you eat. And then you don't want to drink while you're eating because it'll dilute your stomach acid to where you're decreasing your digestive capacities. Some other things you want to avoid is eating late at night. You don't want to snack because your gut does have the rest between meals. So you want to eat a protein rich meal that keeps you satiated so you can go from meal to meal without feeling hungry in between. So you want to have your meals spaced out, 3 or 4 hours apart. You also want to avoid caffeine and alcohol, which has a negative effect on digestion. And then those are really the big ones.
Okay, and then what you think about what's the connection between gut health and immune strength?
I think that the gut health and immune system connection is similar to the gut health and nervous system or the gut nervous system connection, that it's bidirectional. I think that when your gut health is compromised, whether it's because you have impaired digestion or whether it's because you have an unbalanced microbiome, all those things create inflammation in the body, which will put the immune system into overdrive. And we frequently actually see people that have impaired digestion with autoimmune disorders. And once you solve the digestion issue, those autoimmune disorders can improve. So I think there's certainly a connection there.
Okay, and like can healing the gut help reduce things like seasonal allergies or autoimmune flare-ups?
I would say certainly, because I think when you think about inflammation, that also leads to a histamine release. So when you have this sensitivity of the body to histamine, that's similar to allergies. And again, when the gut health improves, when the gut functions more optimally, it's able to absorb all the nutrients necessary. Then you have decreased amount of inflammation. You're also probably gonna have a better balanced blood sugar, which again reduces your inflammation. And when you have less inflammation in the body, your immune system can calm down, which can improve autoimmune conditions.
Okay, so one last question, and then I think we'll probably talk about your coaching and how you help and how people can find it. So, like, how do things like antibiotics, pesticides, or even skincare products affect that health?
That's a great question. So all of them cause inflammation, but they do it in different ways. So an antibiotic doesn't necessarily cause inflammation, but antibiotics are well, they're a necessary evil. We do need antibiotics for especially when we have life-threatening illnesses, but sometimes they can have some negative side effects because they don't just kill whatever is causing the infection. They have a negative effect of the in the gut microbiome as well as, the microbiome in your lungs or in your nose or in your urinary tract. They all get affected by that. So when that happens, you can have overgrowth of undesirable bacteria because all the good guys died and now the bad guys taken over. And that's when you end up with IBS type symptoms like frequent diarrhea or alternating symptoms like diarrhea and constipation. So certainly is something to be proactive about when you're on an antibiotic to replenish with, probiotic foods like we talked earlier, kimchi and sauerkraut and things like that. As far as skincare products, I think that we have to remember that the skin is our largest organ and everything can be absorbed through the skin. And primarily the biggest area of concern is what would you put on your body when you're showering, because when you in the warm water, the pores open and they more easily absorb the chemicals that are in your bath, you know, bath soap or your shampoo or conditioner and those kinds of things. So you want to be really mindful of what kind of products you're using. When you think about it, we use medications that are, designed as a patch to wear on your arm to be absorbed through the skin. So why would we not think that everything else gets absorbed through the skin as well? And what happens down the road then is that these toxins have to be removed from the body by the liver, and then the liver becomes overwhelmed, and then it just leads to a whole host of problems. And I forgot what was the third thing you asked me.
Pesticides.
Oh, pesticides, yes. And that's the same thing as the skincare products or any household chemicals. Pesticides are ubiquitous in today's world. They are just applied to everything in the food chain. So I certainly would recommend for people to opt for organic when they are purchasing things that are grown above ground, especially when it pertains to fruits like strawberries and grapes and apples, because they tend to have more pesticides than things that are grown below the ground. But certainly that's a concern because again, they get absorbed into the bloodstream and into the body, and then the liver has to take care of that, and it creates an extra burden for the body, for sure.
Okay, and do you help clients detox their environment as a part of your journey, at your healing journey?
Yes, I certainly will give some pointers and tips. Ultimately, again, like I said earlier, they have to make that decision if they want to make those changes. But frequently, I find that if you're not making those changes, then you're not going to get results you desire. So we'll talk about different products in the house and what they can use to replace. And there's so many options these days. It really is it's not that difficult to replace those products.
Okay, and
And what I found is actually that a lot of times these newer products, they last a whole lot longer.
mm, so yeah, I mean, yeah. So where's the best place for someone to start if they want to work with you or like take their first step?
Oh, the very first step is just book a call with me. I offer a free call, 30 minutes. You get on my calendar and we'll talk about what your struggles are and what your goals are, and then we'll see if we want to work together and we'll take it from there. But certainly book a free call for 30 minutes and you can do that on my website.
Yeah, one last question, and what would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give to your younger self about health, about that health?
My gosh, if I could go back, I would say sleep at night. It's been just a common theme. So worked in nursing, which I still do that now, but for 2 decades, I worked night shift, and I think that's where a lot of my problems came from. Just working the night shift and the circadian rhythm disruption, eating at night or not eating or eating on the run because I'm in between patients and then trying to sleep during the daytime. It's just the body isn't designed to work that way. And obviously, some people have to do that or choose to do that. But for myself, if I could go back, I would never work night shift.